I refuse to sit beside that man. Caroline Whitmore said it in the aisle of first class as if the seat beside Marcus Ellison had personally insulted her. The cabin of Flight 184 from Miami to New York went quiet in pieces. First the soft click of a suitcase handle stopped, then a flight attendant's smile froze, then the low murmur of boarding passengers thinned into the dry whisper of air vents above cream leather seats. Marcus sat in seat 2A with his boarding pass placed neatly on the tray table, a black pen in his hand, and an investment folder open across his lap. He was a 46-year-old black man in a charcoal suit, polished shoes, no visible jewelry except a simple watch, and the kind of stillness that made people either respect him or mistake him for easy to dismiss. Across the aisle, Caroline stood in a cream cashmere coat with designer sunglasses pushed into her silver blonde hair, one hand resting on the handle of a white leather carry-on, her lips pressed together, as though discomfort had moral weight. Flight attendant Nora Blake stepped closer with the trained calm of someone who had handled delays, arguments, spilled coffee, nervous flyers, and wealthy people who believed the cabin existed to bend around them. "Ma'am, your assigned seat is 2B," Nora said gently. "Mr. Ellison is in 2A. Caroline did not look at Marcus when she answered. That was the cruelty of it. She spoke around him, above him, past him, as if his body occupied space but his humanity did not. "I paid for first class," she said. "I paid for comfort." Marcus lowered his pen to the page and wrote the time in the upper corner of the document, 3:17 in the afternoon. The movement was small, almost invisible, but it gave him something solid to hold while the cabin watched the wrong person for a reaction. He had learned long ago that in rooms built for money, black dignity was often treated like a disturbance before white arrogance was treated like a problem. Nora checked the boarding pass again, though there was nothing to check. The seat assignment was clear. Caroline's name was on 2B. Marcus's name was on 2A. 2 legal passengers. 2 purchase seats. 1 unnecessary humiliation. "There is no seating issue," Nora said. Caroline's voice sharpened, still polished, still careful enough to pretend she was not saying what everyone heard. "I do not feel comfortable." A young passenger in row 3, Ethan Cole, looked up from his phone. Across from him, a businessman stopped fastening his seat belt. An older couple near the window stared at Marcus first, then at Caroline, as if deciding which version of the moment would cost them less to believe. Marcus finally looked up. His eyes were calm, but there was a tiredness in them that did not belong to one flight. It belonged to hotel lobbies, private clubs, boardrooms, elevators, luxury restaurants, and every place where someone had acted surprised that he had arrived with a reservation, an invitation, or authority. "This is my assigned seat," he said. Caroline gave a short laugh without humor. "No one is disputing paperwork." "Then what are you disputing?" Marcus asked. The question landed softly, but it landed everywhere. Nora's face changed. Ethan's thumb moved over his phone screen, not recording at first, only waking the device. Caroline looked at Marcus for the first time, and the glance lasted just long enough to reveal what her words had been trying to cover. "I would like the crew to handle this," she said. "He is making this difficult." Marcus had not raised his voice. He had not blocked the aisle. He had not moved from the seat printed on his boarding pass. Still, the shape of the story was already trying to turn toward him, the way stories often did when a black man stayed calm and someone else called that calm a threat. Marcus closed the cap on his pen, placed it beside the folder, and looked at Nora. "Please make sure your report states that I was seated before she boarded, that I provided my boarding pass, and that I have not violated any airline rule." Nora nodded once, and in that small nod, Caroline's certainty cracked for the first time. Outside the oval window, Miami sunlight glared off the wing. Inside the cabin, Caroline Whitmore stood over the seat she refused to take, unaware that the man she had just tried to move was flying to New York to decide whether her family empire would survive the next 24 hours. Marcus Ellison had spent 46 years learning that dignity did not become louder just because someone tried to bury it under humiliation. He was the founder and managing partner of Ellison Meridian Capital, a private investment firm with offices in Baltimore, Atlanta, and New York, but nothing about him in Seat 2A announced that to Caroline Whitmore. He wore no lapel pin, no luxury watch built to ask for attention, no assistant standing nearby to explain his importance before strangers decided whether he deserved ordinary respect. He carried himself the way his mother had taught him to carry groceries up 3 flights of stairs in West Baltimore, steady, balanced, without wasting breath on people who would not help with the weight. His father had been an electrician who left before dawn with a thermos of coffee and came home smelling faintly of copper wire, dust, and rain. His mother taught 4th grade in a public school where she bought pencils with her own money and told Marcus that the world would test his patience before it tested his intelligence. He had believed her. He had believed her when a private school interviewer spoke more slowly to him than to the white children in the hallway. He had believed her when a hotel clerk in Boston asked if he was waiting for the valet while he held a keynote badge in his hand. He had believed her when a banker once praised his surprising command of numbers, after he had just saved that bank from backing a bad deal. Every insult had entered him, but none had been allowed to become his language. He had built Ellison Meridian Capital around a principle that sounded simple only to people who had never had to defend their place in expensive rooms. Money should strengthen what arrogance weakens. His firm invested in hotels, infrastructure, workforce housing, and community projects that could turn numbers into jobs if the leadership behind them deserved trust. That was why the folder on his lap mattered. Whitmore Hospitality Group was not just another distressed company. It was a family empire with luxury hotels across Florida, Georgia, and New York, a brand polished by inherited money and charity galas, but cracked underneath by debt, poor expansion choices, and board instability. Marcus was flying to New York because his firm had been asked to consider a rescue investment large enough to keep lenders calm and hotels open. He had read the numbers before boarding. He had also read the leadership notes, the foundation records, the public statements, the private concerns. Caroline Whitmore's name appeared more than once. Chairwoman. Major shareholder. Public face of refinement. Guardian of the family legacy. Marcus had not known she would be assigned to the seat beside him, but now her voice had made the paperwork feel less abstract. Nora Blake was still trying to solve the seating issue without naming the thing everyone could hear. Caroline stood in the aisle, chin lifted, cashmere sleeve brushing the seat she refused to take. "There must be another first-class seat," she said. Nora glanced toward the rear of the cabin. "There may be one open seat in row 5. But Mr. Ellison does not need to move." "I did not ask him to move," Caroline said quickly, though that was exactly what her discomfort had demanded. Marcus looked back down at the folder, at the page listing Whitmore Hospitality's Leadership Ethics Review, and closed it halfway. Ethan Cole in row 3 had begun recording now, phone low near his chest. Marcus saw the reflection of the screen in the dark window, but he did not stop him. Some truths needed witnesses because memory alone was too easy for powerful people to edit. Caroline turned to the businessman across the aisle, searching for sympathy in a face that looked like her world. "First class used to have standards," she said softly enough to pretend it was not meant for the whole cabin, clearly enough that it reached every seat. Marcus felt the words pass over him, old and cold. He thought of his mother standing in their Baltimore kitchen after a long school day, telling him, "Never let someone else's shame teach you to hate your own reflection." He placed his palm flat on the folder and breathed once through the moment. Then he looked at Nora, not Caroline. "I would like the cabin report to include that statement too," he said. Nora nodded, her professional calm now carrying something firmer. Caroline's eyes flashed, but Marcus did not give her anger anything to hold. He simply sat in the seat he had purchased, beside the window, above the wing, while Miami sunlight burned white outside the glass and a woman who believed he did not belong unknowingly introduced herself to the man who would soon decide whether her family name still had a future. Caroline Whitmore had been raised to believe refinement was something other people proved by making her comfortable. At 55, she moved through the world with inherited ease, the kind that came from private clubs, charity luncheons, hotel suites with her family name on the stationery, and staff who learned to read her displeasure before she had to explain it. Her cream cashmere coat was soft enough to look effortless. Her white leather carry-on rolled behind her like a small polished pet, and the diamond bracelet at her wrist caught the cabin light every time she adjusted her sunglasses. She had spent the morning in Miami attending a donor breakfast for the Whitmore Legacy Foundation, smiling for photographs beside floral arrangements, and speaking about dignity and hospitality, as if the word belonged to her. By sunset, she expected to be in New York, seated at a private dinner with board members and advisors, preparing for the most important meeting her family business had faced in a decade. Whitmore Hospitality Group looked graceful from the outside. Its lobbies smelled of lilies and lemon oil. Its advertisements showed marble bathrooms, ocean views, rooftop bars, and doormen in pressed coats. But beneath that shine, the company was carrying debt like a weight under silk. A failed luxury expansion in South Florida had drained cash. Lenders were tightening. A labor dispute in Georgia had embarrassed the board. Several properties needed renovations they could not afford without new capital. Caroline did not think of any of that as failure. She thought of it as a temporary inconvenience caused by people who lacked vision, patience, and the kind of breeding she believed protected families like hers from ordinary consequences. Her younger brother, David, had warned her that Ellison Meridian Capital would be conducting a leadership review before offering rescue money. Caroline had laughed when he said it. Investors review numbers, she had told him. They do not review manners. That was the mistake her life had trained her to make. She believed manners meant knowing which fork to use, which hotel manager to praise, which charity chair to flatter, and which people belonged in which spaces. First class, to Caroline, was not just a cabin. It was confirmation. The wide leather seats, the quiet service, the warm towel before departure, the champagne she usually declined only so people would notice discipline, all of it assured her that the world still had order. Marcus Ellison sitting calmly in 2A disrupted that order for reasons she would never name, honestly. He was not loud. He was not poorly dressed. He was not in her way. He simply did not fit the picture she had carried onto the plane. That was enough for her discomfort to pretend it was principle. Nora Blake returned from the front galley with the passenger manifest in her hand, though her face already said there was nothing there to rescue Caroline from the truth. "Ma'am," Nora said, "we have confirmed both assignments. Mr. Ellison is correctly seated in 2A. You are assigned to 2B. There is an available seat in 5D if you prefer not to sit here, but he will not be asked to move." Caroline's cheeks tightened. The offer should have solved the problem. Instead, it exposed it. Moving herself would admit that Marcus had done nothing wrong. Demanding that he move allowed her to pretend the disturbance belonged to him. "So this airline is choosing to ignore a passenger's comfort," she said. Nora's voice stayed calm. "We are honoring the seat assignments and safety procedures." Marcus looked down at the folder on his lap, where Caroline's name appeared again beneath the phrase Public Governance Concern. He read it once, then closed the page slowly. The cabin door had not yet closed, but something in the next 24 hours already had. Nora Blake held the passenger manifest in both hands as if the paper itself could steady the cabin. The last few passengers were still waiting near the front galley, trapped behind Caroline's white leather carry-on and the invisible wall her refusal had built in the aisle. A baby fussed somewhere behind row 10. A suitcase wheel clicked once, then stopped. The aircraft had not left the gate, yet the air already felt pressurized by more than altitude. Caroline looked from Nora to Marcus, then to the empty seat in row 5 as if it were an insult wrapped in leather. "I should not have to move," she said. "I am the one being made uncomfortable." Marcus looked up from the closed folder on his lap. His boarding pass still sat on the tray table with his name and seat assignment visible. His hands rested calmly on the armrests, open, still, patient in a way that made Caroline's agitation look even sharper. "Discomfort is not an emergency," he said. The sentence was not loud. It did not need to be. It reached the front row, then row 3, then the businessman across the aisle whose eyes dropped to his shoes. Caroline's face flushed beneath the careful makeup. "Do not speak to me that way. I answered the claim you made about me," Marcus said. "I have not disturbed you. I have not touched your seat. I have not delayed boarding. I am sitting where the airline assigned me." Nora nodded slightly, then turned back to Caroline. "Ma'am, we can assist you with seat 5D if you would prefer more space." Caroline's fingers tightened around the handle of her carry-on. "More space is not the issue." The cabin heard the truth before she covered it. Ethan Cole's phone was recording now, held low against his chest, angled carefully between the seats. He did not speak. He only watched the way powerful people sometimes revealed themselves when they believed politeness would protect them from consequence. Caroline leaned closer to Nora, lowering her voice but not enough. "I simply do not want to spend 3 hours beside people like him." The words entered the cabin and changed its temperature. Nora's professional expression hardened by 1 degree. The older couple by the window looked away. The businessman across the aisle finally looked at Caroline, not Marcus. Marcus did not move for several seconds. Something in his face closed, not with anger, but with recognition. He had heard different versions of those words his entire life, dressed in different clothing, spoken under chandeliers, behind reception desks, in investor lounges, at hotel bars, in boardrooms where people smiled before making him prove he belonged. He looked at Nora. "Please include that statement in the cabin report." Caroline straightened. "Are you threatening me?" Marcus met her eyes. "No. I am documenting you." Nora stepped between them just enough to make the boundary clear. "Mr. Ellison has complied with all seating and boarding requirements," she said. "If you choose not to take your assigned seat, I can reseat you in 5D. But he will not be moved." Caroline stared at Marcus as if waiting for shame to do what airline policy would not. It did not. He picked up his pen, turned the folder slightly on his lap, and wrote another note beneath the time. Nora glanced toward the front, where the lead flight attendant was speaking quietly into the interphone, likely informing the captain of a passenger conflict before the cabin door closed. Caroline heard it, and seemed to understand that the scene had stopped bending toward her. Her voice softened into something colder. "This is unbelievable." Marcus looked down at the folder again. On the page beneath his hand, Whitmore Hospitality Group's Leadership Ethics Review waited beside columns of debt, board instability, and rescue capital projections. Caroline thought the issue was a seat. Marcus now knew it was evidence. Outside the window, the jet bridge lights glowed against the afternoon sun, and inside first class, the woman who demanded standards had just placed her own character on record. Caroline Whitmore did not take seat 5D immediately. She stood in the aisle as if waiting for the cabin to remember who she was, as if inherited money might still rise from the carpet and carry Marcus Ellison somewhere else. Nora Blake kept one hand lightly on the top of the empty first-class seat behind her, her posture polite but fixed. The lead flight attendant had finished speaking with the captain, and the boarding door remained open just long enough for the delay to become visible. Passengers shifted in their seats. A man in row 4 checked his watch. Someone behind the curtain sighed softly. Caroline heard all of it, and decided the inconvenience belonged to Marcus. "This is exactly what I mean," she said, turning toward the watching cabin. "I said I was uncomfortable, and now everyone is treating me like the problem." Marcus stayed still. His folder rested closed on his lap, one hand on top of it, his boarding pass still visible on the tray table like a quiet witness. "You are not the problem because you are uncomfortable," he said. "You are the problem because you believe your discomfort should remove me." A hush moved through first class, thin and cold. Ethan Cole's phone remained low, recording not a performance, but the careful collapse of one. Caroline's mouth tightened. "You are twisting my words." Marcus looked at Nora. "Please include that response as well." Caroline laughed once, sharp but nervous. "Do you think writing things down makes you important?" Marcus did not answer at first. He looked out the window, where a baggage cart rolled past under the white glare of Miami's sun, ordinary workers moving around the plane with the calm efficiency of people who understood real work did not need applause. Then he turned back to her. "No," he said. "It makes the record harder to edit." Nora stepped closer, voice lower now. "Ma'am, you have two choices. You may take your assigned seat, or you may accept 5D. If you continue delaying boarding, we will have to involve the captain's decision on your travel today." The word captain changed Caroline's face. Not because she felt sorry, but because consequence had entered the cabin wearing authority she recognized. She looked down at Marcus one last time, searching for fear, apology, irritation, anything that would let her call him the disturbance. He gave her nothing. His calm was not weakness. It was a locked door. Finally, Caroline pulled her white carry-on back with a stiff motion and moved toward row 5. Nora followed to help place the bag overhead, but Caroline lifted one hand. "I can manage." She could not gracefully. The carry-on caught against the edge of the bin, and a younger passenger stood to help before realizing Caroline would rather struggle than accept kindness in public. The moment was small, but Marcus saw it. Pride had a way of turning even help into insult. Once Caroline sat in 5D, the cabin exhaled. The boarding door closed. The safety announcement began. Nora returned to 2A, leaned slightly toward Marcus, and spoke in a voice meant only for him. "Mr. Ellison, I am sorry for what happened. I will file the cabin report." Marcus nodded. "Thank you. Please make sure it includes that I did not ask for any passenger to be moved, and that I requested documentation only after she made the statements." "I will," Nora said. Her eyes carried the tired apology of someone who had seen too many people confuse service with surrender. As the plane pushed back from the gate, Caroline sat 3 rows behind him, rigid, phone in her hand, typing a message with quick, angry thumbs. Marcus did not look back. He opened the Whitmore Hospitality Group folder again. The first page after the financial summary was labeled Leadership Ethics Review. Beneath that, Caroline's name appeared beside Foundation Governance, Brand Reputation, Board Influence, and Public Conduct Risk. He read the words differently now. Not as concerns submitted by lawyers. As a preview confirmed at 30,000 feet. The engines deepened. The plane turned toward the runway. Miami began to slide away beyond the oval window, bright and distant. Marcus placed one more note in the margin, then capped his pen. Caroline had wanted a different seat because she thought he did not belong beside her. She did not know she had just given him the clearest answer to the question he was flying to New York to ask, whether her family's empire deserved to be saved by his money. The climb out of Miami softened the cabin in a way silence on the ground never could. Engines settled into a deep, steady sound, seatbelt lights glowed above the aisle, and sunlight spread across the wing like white fire before the plane rose into a layer of gray cloud. First class returned to its practiced calm. Glasses stopped trembling on tray tables. A flight attendant moved quietly with bottled water. Passengers reopened laptops, adjusted headphones, and pretended the scene at the gate had been only a delay, not a mirror. Marcus Ellison sat by the window with the Whitmore Hospitality Group folder open again, but he did not read immediately. His eyes stayed on the clouds as Miami disappeared beneath them, all that heat and glass and runway shrinking into distance. 3 rows behind him, Caroline Whitmore sat in 5D with her coat folded tightly across her lap, typing on her phone with the rigid focus of someone trying to turn embarrassment into complaint before shame could reach her. Marcus did not look back. He did not need to. The shape of her words was already in the cabin report, on Ethan Cole's phone, in Nora Blake's memory, and in the margin of the page beneath his hand. He turned the folder slowly. Debt pressure. Failed expansion. Deferred renovations. Foundation governance. Public conduct risk. Board instability. The language was clean, but the meaning was heavy. People could lose jobs if his firm walked away. Hotel workers in Atlanta, Miami, Savannah, and Queens could feel the consequences long before Caroline did. That was why Marcus never treated investment decisions like personal revenge. Money was not a weapon to him. It was a responsibility with receipts. He looked down at the page where Caroline's name appeared beside the phrase leadership influence. Before the flight, those words had been abstract, the kind of cautious phrasing lawyers used when they wanted to warn without accusing. Now they had a voice. They had cashmere sleeves, a white carry-on, and a sentence spoken in first class as if humanity were an amenity she had paid to avoid. Marcus closed his eyes for one breath. His mother's voice rose from somewhere older than the clouds. Never let someone else's shame teach you to hate your own reflection. He could still see her in the Baltimore kitchen, school papers spread beside a pot of rice, tired feet in house slippers, dignity held together by work no donor gala would ever honor. She had taught children who arrived hungry, defended boys called disruptive before they were heard, and corrected Marcus whenever anger tried to make him careless. You can hold people accountable, she used to say, without becoming what hurt you. Marcus opened his eyes. The cabin light had dimmed slightly. Nora walked past and paused just long enough to place a folded note beside his water. It contained her name, employee identification, and a brief line confirming she would file the cabin report after landing. Marcus nodded once. She returned the nod with quiet respect and moved on. Ethan's phone screen reflected faintly in the window as he reviewed the video without sending it anywhere yet. Marcus appreciated that. Evidence did not need to become spectacle to remain true. He picked up his pen and wrote beneath the leadership section, Verify incident report. Request passenger statement. Reassess governance trust. The words were not emotional, but his hand felt the weight of them. Outside, the plane moved above the weather, smooth and bright. Inside, Caroline sat apart from the seat she had refused, unaware that distance had not protected her. It had clarified her. Marcus closed the folder, not in anger, not in triumph, but with the quiet certainty of a man who had been shown exactly what kind of leadership his capital would be asked to save. The next morning, New York looked washed and metallic beneath a thin winter rain. Caroline Whitmore arrived at the Whitmore Hospitality Group boardroom on Madison Avenue wearing a pale silk blouse, a charcoal skirt suit, and the same diamond bracelet that had caught the cabin light the day before. She had slept poorly but told herself exhaustion was the reason her reflection looked strange in the elevator doors. Not shame. Not fear. Just travel, pressure, and an inconvenient passenger who had made a simple seating preference seem uglier than it was. The boardroom sat on the 28th floor, with tall windows facing a gray skyline and a long table polished so deeply that every face appeared twice, once above the wood and once beneath it. David Whitmore stood near the coffee service, checking messages from lenders who had become less patient by the hour. Board Chair Samuel Price reviewed the agenda at the head of the table. Several directors spoke in low voices about liquidity, renovation delays, labor concerns, and the rescue package expected from Ellison Meridian Capital. Caroline took her seat with practiced confidence, placing her phone face down beside a leather portfolio embossed with the Whitmore crest. She had already decided how the meeting would go. The investors would arrive, they would admire the brand, they would respect the family history, and by lunch the room would feel hopeful again. Then the door opened. Rachel Kim entered first, legal counsel for Ellison Meridian Capital, carrying a slim black folder, and wearing the calm expression of someone who had already read more than the room wanted her to know. Behind her came Marcus Ellison. For one breath, Caroline did not understand what she was seeing. Her mind tried to place him back in seat 2A, by the airplane window, pen in hand, quietly requesting a cabin report. But he was here now, in a dark suit, rain still beaded on the shoulders of his overcoat, moving into the boardroom with the unhurried authority of a man no one needed to introduce twice. Samuel Price stood immediately. "Mr. Ellison," he said. "Thank you for coming." Chairs shifted. Conversations died. David's eyes moved from Marcus to Caroline and stayed there. Rachel placed folders at each seat, then remained standing beside Marcus. "For the record," Samuel continued, voice careful, "Marcus Ellison is the founder and managing partner of Ellison Meridian Capital, and the final authority on the proposed rescue investment. The words crossed the table and found Caroline where she sat. Her fingers tightened around the edge of her portfolio. The cabin returned in fragments: Nora's steady voice, Ethan's phone, the boarding pass on the tray table, Marcus saying, "Discomfort is not an emergency." Marcus looked at her then, not with surprise, not with anger, not with satisfaction. That made it worse. He looked at her like someone reading a document that had already confirmed itself. Caroline's mouth opened slightly. "Mr. Ellison," she said, her voice thinner than she expected. "I did not realize." Marcus waited, giving her room to finish the sentence as she dared. She did not. Rachel opened her folder. "Before we discuss the investment terms, Ellison Meridian has received a cabin incident report from yesterday's Flight 184, a passenger video, and a written statement from the lead flight attendant. Because Whitmore Hospitality's leadership review is a condition of the proposed financing, we need to address those materials." The room became completely still. Caroline looked around for sympathy and found only calculation. The same world that had protected her comfort for years was now measuring the cost of it. Marcus sat down across from her, placed his closed folder on the table, and folded his hands. "Yesterday," he said quietly, "you told an airplane cabin who you believed belonged beside you. Today, this board has to decide whether that belief belongs anywhere near a company asking my firm to save it." The rain tapped softly against the windows, and for the first time in Caroline Whitmore's life, refinement had no chair left to hide in. Rachel Kim did not play the video first. She began with the paper, because paper made the room behave. She placed the cabin incident report in front of Samuel Price, then passed copies to David Whitmore and the directors sitting along the glass table. The report was quiet in the way official language often was, but every sentence carried the weight of what Caroline had tried to make disappear: assigned seat verified, passenger in 2A compliant, passenger in 2B refused assigned seat, passenger in 2B requested relocation because of discomfort, passenger in 2A requested documentation, passenger in 2B used the phrase "people like him." Caroline stared at the page as if the words had been planted there by someone crueler than memory. "That was taken out of context," she said, but her voice had lost the polished edge she trusted in public rooms. Rachel set a tablet on the table and tapped the screen once. Ethan Cole's video filled the silence without needing volume at first. Caroline saw herself standing in the aisle, cashmere bright under cabin lights, sunglasses in her hair, white carry-on beside her, refusing a seat she had paid for because of the man assigned next to it. Then Nora Blake's written statement followed, confirming that Marcus had not raised his voice, had not delayed boarding, had not asked for special treatment, and had only requested that the incident be documented after Caroline's statements became discriminatory. David Whitmore lowered his eyes to the table. The family crest on his portfolio suddenly looked less like history and more like a burden. Samuel Price removed his glasses slowly. "Caroline," he said, "the rescue investment required a leadership ethics review. This is directly material." Caroline turned toward Marcus, finally looking at him as the person she should have seen yesterday. "I was exhausted. It was travel stress. I did not know who you were." Marcus rested his hands on the closed folder in front of him. His voice stayed even, which made the room listen harder. "You knew I was a passenger with an assigned seat. That should have been enough." Her face tightened. "I did not mean it that way." Marcus looked at the tablet, then back at her. "You were not tired," he said. "You were honest." The sentence did not strike loudly, but it left no surface untouched. Rachel opened another folder. "Given the incident, the existing governance concerns, the labor dispute, and the brand exposure risk, Ellison Meridian Capital cannot proceed with the proposed rescue investment." A director at the far end of the table closed his notebook as if the sound might help him absorb the loss. David whispered, "Without that capital, the lenders will accelerate." Rachel did not soften the answer. "Our withdrawal notice will be delivered within the hour." Caroline stood halfway, then stopped because no one else moved with her. "You are destroying a company over a seat on an airplane," Marcus's eyes held hers, steady and tired. "No," he said. "I am declining to save a company whose public guardian could not recognize dignity at arm's length." Samuel pushed back his chair and stood. "This board will convene an emergency session immediately. Caroline, pending formal vote, I am asking you to step down as chairwoman of the foundation and recuse yourself from all financing discussions." Her mouth opened, but the room that had once protected her had changed sides. David looked away. The directors avoided her eyes. Her phone began vibrating against the table, one message after another: donors, counsel, press contacts, all arriving too late to stop what character had already revealed. Caroline sat down slowly, smaller than the chair beneath her. Marcus did not smile. He did not celebrate the collapse of a name people had worked under for decades. He simply gathered his folder, stood with Rachel, and gave Samuel a brief nod. "Send the employee impact materials to my office," he said. "If there is a way to protect workers without protecting this leadership, we will review it separately." Then he walked out, leaving the unsigned rescue package on the table, while Caroline looked at the empty seat across from her and understood that the man she refused to sit beside had just refused to carry everything her arrogance had broken. 24 hours after Caroline Whitmore stood in first class and refused the seat beside Marcus Ellison, she sat alone in her Manhattan penthouse above a city that no longer seemed impressed by height. Rain moved down the windows in thin silver lines, blurring the towers she had spent her life believing belonged to people like her. Her cream cashmere coat hung over the back of a chair, no longer elegant, only heavy. On the glass coffee table, her phone lit up again and again with messages from attorneys, board members, donors, public relations advisors, and old friends suddenly careful with their words. The emergency board session had ended before sunset. Samuel Price had confirmed her removal as chairwoman pending formal ratification. The Whitmore Legacy Foundation had frozen her authority over donor funds. 2 lenders had requested immediate calls. A major charity gala had quietly removed her name from the program. By evening, Ethan Cole's video had reached the board through legal channels, then the press through someone less patient. By morning, the woman who had once been introduced as the face of refinement was being discussed as a liability. Caroline stared at the screen without answering. She wanted to blame Marcus. She wanted to blame the flight attendant, the passenger with the phone, the board, the rain, the timing, the pressure, the impossible cruelty of being judged by one moment. But the video had not created her voice. It had only preserved it. Across town, Marcus walked through the lobby of a Whitmore hotel without looking up at the gold letters above the reception desk. Rachel Kim walked beside him, carrying a folder marked Employee Impact Review. He had not returned to take satisfaction from the damage. He had come because hundreds of workers still stood behind the brand Caroline had disgraced, and he wanted to know whether there was a lawful path to protect them without protecting the leadership that had failed them. The lobby smelled of lilies and polished wood. A bellman nodded. A desk clerk recognized him and straightened, but Marcus gave no sign of triumph. He paused near the entrance where rain tapped softly against the glass awning. Outside, taxis moved along the curb, their headlights trembling in puddles. Rachel looked at him. "The board is prepared to separate worker protections from family control," she said. Marcus nodded slowly. "Then we review that. Carefully." He stepped outside into the gray afternoon, the same folder held close against his coat. He thought of seat 2A, of Caroline standing over him, of all the places where people had confused access with worth and money with moral permission. He had not taken everything from her. He had simply refused to rescue what her own contempt had revealed. Back in the penthouse, Caroline finally stood and walked to the window. Far below, traffic moved without caring who had lost a title, a foundation, a rescue package, or a reputation. Her reflection looked smaller in the rain-streaked glass than it ever had in any magazine photograph. For the first time, there was no assistant to smooth the room, no board to protect the name, no money powerful enough to make the sentence disappear. She had not lost everything because Marcus wanted revenge. She had lost it because dignity had kept a record, and the record had finally been allowed to speak.